Antler Up, Episode 8. Jed Roberts. Let's go.
Antler Up, Edmonton. The Elks are on the board. There it is. Antler Up, Edmonton. Touchdown, Elks.
Cornelius will throw to the outside to Shai Ross. At the 10, to the 5. Antler Up, Edmonton. Touchdown, Elks.
Welcome inside the Joey Moss suite here at the Brickfield at Commonwealth Stadium. And we're doing a first today on Antler Up. We got our first alumni. Jed Roberts joins us. Hey, Jed, thanks for coming over.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is wonderful. I love being in the stadium, and it's doubly special just being in the Joey Moss suite. You know, this is my first time in here, so I'm a little bit starry-eyed, so forgive me if I'm looking around with my eyes wide.
What are your memories of Joey?
Oh, man. Joey used to listen to James Bond show tunes, and he would vacuum the locker room, and he would sing along in the way that only Joey could. And, yeah. You know, lots of happy memories, lots of jokes and stuff. And he'd come in with his Luca Libra, you know.
Yeah.
He was a lot of fun, man. He loved wrestling. And so to be in here, it's kind of cool. It's just, I wasn't expecting the layout, the way they've got the pictures of him and stuff. So I'm going down memory lane now as we do this. So this is cool. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job. It's pretty cool in here for sure. All right, Jed, when you look up your resume with the Edmonton football team, first thing you see is special teams tackles. You are the all-time record holder, more than anybody else in franchise history. The thing I've learned about guys who get a lot of special teams tackles, and please don't take this the wrong way, but they're just a little crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, to do what you do as a special teamer, to just pick a lane, run as fast as you can, as hard as you can, and try to crash into somebody, it is kind of a crazy way to make a living, isn't it?
Yeah, you know what, though? I miss it. I still have dreams about it. You know, for years, I was the arrow, what they call the arrow on kickoff. And now, if you know anything about special teams, you're right. People that play it have to be a little bit unhinged, and I was certainly that when I played football. But as the arrow, I was right next to Sean Fleming for, 11 years, and everyone formed their lanes off of me. So what that meant was I was the only one head up on the ball. And so I would always tell everybody in the huddle, meet me or beat me, because one way or the other, we're all getting there to, let's arrive there at the same time. So I had to be big enough to create some chaos at the time of the collision, but I had to be quick enough and fast enough to beat everybody else down there because I'm running with receivers and defensive backs. And so I had a little bit of an unusual skill set. I was a jack of all trades, master of none type of guy. So I was pretty well suited, I think, for special teams because I could do a little bit of everything pretty well, but nothing perfect.
So basically, Sean kicked the ball and said, go get him.
Yeah, he said, everybody form your lanes off Jed. I was head up, and then anybody to the right of me kept the ball on their left shoulder. Anybody to the left of me kept the ball on their right shoulder. It's pretty simple. It's kind of frustrating because I'm watching them give up big returns here. I'm like, oh, it's so simple. Just keep the ball inside on your inside shoulder. So.
163 special teams tackles. Does one stand out?
Do
you ever have that perfect hit, that perfect lane?
Yeah, I caught Nick Mazzoli here in Commonwealth Stadium, and I remember he tried to zig when he should have zagged, and I caught him in the air, and it was a perfect form tackle, and I took him down, and we were just talking a little bit earlier about the big crowds we used to get in here, and it was just like everybody just sort of drew a breath collectively, and then everybody left it, let it out in unison. It was really cool. Got up and put one finger up, So for 10 seconds I was cool, and then everybody moved on to the next play. So
here's something a lot of people probably don't realize about special teams tackles is they hurt you too, right? Mm-hmm. Guys get hurt making tackles. A lot of guys get hurt getting tackled, getting hit. But
they can. But you got to work really hard to get down there. It's not like a regular defensive play where you go in your gap or your responsibility and then migrate to the play. Special teams, you're talking about an exchange of field position of 40 yards typically. So after you've already run 40, 50, 60 yards in some cases, you've got to break down and make the tackle. So it's quite a bit of there's a lot more involved than people think.
163 tackles, as I mentioned. I think you're like 50 ahead of the next guy, right? Or more, around that anyway. I think that's a record that's never going to be broken.
It might not be.
Today's careers are shorter, one-year contracts, guys move around more. I think it's safe to say that Jed Roberts will always have the special teams tackles.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you may or may not realize this, but number 3 or number 2 is back with the team right now, but he hasn't been playing. The linebacker.
Dion Lacey?
Yes, Dion has quite a few. I think
He's got the record for most in a season. I think he had 29 in one year, which is
and it
incredible.
might even be up around 30. But Dion's quite. I love watching him. Whenever he's in there, I'm like, and I tell my boys, like, you want to watch somebody cover kick, watch Dion. Because he did the same thing when he was playing in the NFL. So, it's fun to watch. But yeah, you're right. We were talking about the one year contracts and the movement of people from one team to the other. So when you say, most franchise, anything, it's really difficult nowadays to do that because of all the movement around the league. It's great for players being able to make more money elsewhere, but it's tough when you're talking about long-term records like that.
And I don't think anybody's going to play 13 years for one team anymore either.
Yeah, it's really different. I mean, Calvin just did that. He went to Calgary to end his career, but Calvin McCarty, and those guys are outliers. Mike Miller, he's in Winnipeg now, but now, when you see a guy that's been playing anywhere over 10 years, typically they play for 3, 4, maybe sometimes 5 teams.
Yeah, if Mike would have stayed, he probably would have your record by now, right? Because he's the all-time,
absolutely.
all-time leader.
And
so,
you may not know this, but I was the guest coach his rookie year, and I remember watching him. And I took him and a couple of other guys, and we did some Mike Cornell, I think is his name, and we worked on escapes. And by that I mean when somebody's trying to block you on punt, I was trying to teach him how to release one way or the other, and showing him a swim, and he's like, "Wow, this is really cool." Nobody's ever. And I said, "Yeah, man, if you can perfect these, that'll increase your toes."
In that era, they had a great group. It was Mike Miller, Mike Cornell, and Corbin Sharoon.
Yep.
And those three guys.
Those guys were demons,
dynamite,
and those were the 3 guys I was working with. I was like, "Listen, come here," and we would work after every practice, and I would teach them how to. Release off of blocks. Like, you make sure you take your block, but the rules have changed now, right? Like, you have to stay until the ball's kicked, whereas before you could take off early. So, and that's another reason why the record may never be broken, because the game's different now.
Yeah,
so.
for sure. All right, let's before we go back and talk about your career in green and gold, let's talk about what are you doing now. What's your days like now?
Well, I work as a mentor for at-risk youth in the inner city. I work for an agency. It's something that I actually slid into while I was playing. I started working out for an agency called Oak Hill Boys Ranch. Nealon Green, quarterback in the late 90s. Eric Blunt, who's actually still there at Oak Hill Boys Ranch. Rio Wells. So there's a big group of us that were out there. Arrow Martin. And a lot of us, I stayed there for 10 years. And then I moved on from there to other agencies. And I'm still doing the same thing. It's really... I get paid to hang out with kids, and I really do whistle while I work. I take kids to appointments, and we go to the movies or whatever. I mean, if the kid wants to hang out with their friends, and they do that for the day. But it's actually, it's just, it's not an easy job because sometimes you're dealing with a lot of trauma-related stuff and lots of at-risk behaviors and no day is ever the same, and it's something that I actually find comes pretty natural and easy for me, being a bigger guy, but you'd be surprised, I've had some kids that are like, I don't care how big you are, we're going today. I'm like, oh, okay, here we go.
So obviously rewarding work for you,
Yeah.
or you wouldn't be doing it still, right?
That was something that when I was playing, I had to look around, and I was very lucky because my dad played in the Canadian Football League for 7 years. He was with the Ottawa Rough Riders. He won 2 Grey Cups in '68 and '69. And he told me that. He says, you need to look around while you're playing and take a look at the landscape in the city. He says Edmonton is a great community. It's a small town disguised as a big city. There's 6 degrees of separation from one person to the next at any given moment. And if you're willing to give back your time to the community will embrace you. And you can parlay that into something that could be quite, gratifying. And so I've always been that person. I had to feel like I was doing something meaningful. I not to say that, sales is not meaningful, but that just wasn't my thing. I tried it. Wasn't, I worked in sporting goods, selling sporting equipments to schools and stuff, and I liked it. But at the end of the day, I had to give people a discount so I could feel good about not ripping people off. And so it's tough. It's a fine line, right? So, but when I'm working with kids in care, working with kids that have trauma-related issues, I feel like I'm actually maybe helping them to make their day better and maybe keeping them safe. And that, to me, when I go to sleep at night, that makes me feel pretty good. So that's why I do it.
It turns out 1990, you get cut by the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. turned out at the time you're probably devastated, but here we are, 30 years later, and you're at Edmonton, and
and that's what my dad said.
Well.
My dad said it's a community-owned team, and I didn't really understand what he meant when he said that, right? Because I was born in Ottawa, moved away when I was about 6 or 7 years old, moved in with my grandparents, my mom's parents, because my dad and my mom split up when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I lived in eastern Tennessee, and I played all my football in the U.S. So I'm an American-trained Canadian, so I'm kind of like that, great white buffalo unicorn type of player, right? Where I have the right birth certificate, but I have the training that, I remember we were talking before the broadcast about being a kid and going to games. I used to go Friday Night Lights, Oak Ridge High School, Wildcats, and 10,000 people, and the whole town would shut down, and we would all get a ball and play behind the end zone. And, football's religion down there like hockey is up here. So then I came back up here. I got a chance to play in Winnipeg because the head coach, Mike Riley, was my defensive coordinator at the University of Northern Colorado for 1 year. Mm-hmm. And then he went back up to Winnipeg. And so he got me in there, but I got hurt right away. I aggravated a hamstring injury in Texas running for conditioning before I came into training camp. And first play I was in practice, I was covering Robert Mims on a route, and I re-aggravated it, and then I rehabbed it. As soon as I rehabbed it, they let me go. And I was devastated. And they wanted to send me to Oklahoma City to play for a minor league football team that they were hiding players down there. Former Arizona State coach Daryl Rogers was the head coach there. Yeah. And so they were getting guys jobs, and then we were, you would play football, and then you'd work in the Oklahoma Heat. And I'd just come from Texas. I wasn't going back to that. So I called every team. The first team to call me back was Edmonton, and then Bruce Lemmerman brought me in, and I've been here ever since. And it's been a wonderful ride. Like I tell people, I've been trying to tell some of the guys that are here now, man, like stay here. Like the people love you here, man. Like if you put some time into the community, they'll reward you tenfold.
And you're 20 years past retirement, right?
Oh yeah, I love it. I come here, and it's just like coming home every time I come here. My oldest son learned how to walk in the Alumni room, when he was 1 year old. So it's a family affair. It's a labor. It's near to my heart, right? Like every time I come in here, it's just comfortable. It's warm, and it's just a place that I always know that I'm welcome. I always feel like I'm coming back home every time I walk through the gates and come into a game, or even if I'm coming to Fan Day today. It was awesome to see a lot of the same people that come, and we do have our diehard fans, and times are a little bit tough and things are lean right now, but every team goes through that from time to time. And I'm very optimistic that we have the leadership in place to make our way through some of the challenges and stuff. We have a unique set of things that are sort of keeping us from being competitive at this point. But I'm optimistic. I've always been an optimistic person, and I don't think that tough times don't last, but tough people do, right? So we've got some really good people up on the top there that know how to steer organizations through tough times, and I'm really happy with the work that Victor's doing behind the scenes. And Chris Jones, everybody knows what he can do. It's a bit of a mad scientist, bringing in different people every day. It's just crazy, all the different personalities that come in. And I have faith that at some point he'll arrive at the right mix of guys. And when you're like, I remember we went through a rebuild in '98 after we lost the Western Final in Calgary, and we brought in Nealon Green, and it was it's eerily similar to what we're doing this year. Like our aging defense had been gutted, and we didn't really even know I didn't know anybody's name, And it took us a year or two to because we went 6-12 that first year. Still made the playoffs though. Never missed the playoffs while I was playing. But if it wasn't for Saskatchewan, we would have. Saskatchewan, we beat them 3 times that year. So otherwise we would have been, 3 and whatever it is, 15. But it's going to be a tough, turnaround. I think that I've been telling people that it'll get a little bit worse, I think, on the field before it gets better, because you can't win in this league without a quarterback, and then right now, unfortunately, Trey Ford's hurt, and we're not really sure which guy's going to be the one that's kind of next man up. But Chris knows what he's doing, and I'm sure he's probably got some things going on and that we don't know about, and I know that everybody knows what a defensive genius he is. It takes a while for those guys to get comfortable enough to know where they're supposed to be lining up, I mean, in this last game, I know it was a tough score, but if you look at it closer, you see the kick returns that we gave up. You see the long play there where the corner wasn't in the right spot. I mean, it was just little things things that you can, if you correct those things, the game's not quite as lopsided as it was. I mean, it was close for a while too, right? So, I mean, this is a young team, and they'll figure it out. So.
All right, second half of Antler Up with Jed Roberts coming up in a moment. The Antler Up podcast is recorded in the Joey Moss Championship Suite. The Joey Moss Suite opened in 2022 to honor Joey, his great legacy, and to remember one of Edmonton's greatest heroes. The Joey Moss Suite is a great place to watch an Elks game from. To learn more about how to purchase the Joey Moss Championship Suite for an upcoming Elks game, email partnerships@goelks.com. After last Thursday's loss to the Calgary Stampeders, the Elks are now 1-4 this season. They'll be in Montreal for their next game, playing the Alouettes tomorrow night. The Owls so far are 1-3, and they've had a very eventful week this past week with the changing at the head coach position with Danny Machocha taking over. Next home game for the Elks is going to be against the two-time Grey Cup champion Winnipeg Blue Bombers. That game will go Friday, July 22nd on the Brickfield at Commonwealth Stadium. You can get all your ticket information at Ticketmaster or goelks.com. First up, though, it's the Alouettes tomorrow night. You can watch the game on TSN. You can listen to it on 6:30 Ched with myself and Dave Campbell. 4 o'clock for the Countdown to Kickoff show. 5:30 is game time for the Elks and the Alouettes.
It's a logo that's synonymous with Canadian football excellence. 14 Grey Cups and counting. 52 Hall of Famers. For decades, we've proudly worn the green and gold into battle. Proud of who we play for. Proud of where we call home, and proud to be part of a great tradition. The logo on our helmet meant doing things the right way, the Edmonton way. It needed no explanation. Take one look, and you still know what it represents. Legends like Moon, Kepley, Gizmo, and Ray, forever bonded by the double E. 2 letters bridging a glorious past with an exciting future. It's time for the next chapter. It's time for the next double E dynasty.
You just heard Jed Roberts' voicing the video when the Elks went to this here on their helmets.
Yeah.
How did that come about for you, and how did you enjoy doing that?
Well, you know what? They asked me if I would, and it was really weird because I was like, never really thought of myself as being a voice actor, right? So they asked me about the idea of lending my voice to the helmet unveiling, and I, okay, sure. And it worked. It went a lot better than I thought it would because I practiced with my wife. My wife gave me some pretty good feedback. She's like, "Yeah, don't do that. You can do this, but yeah, don't do that thing. That thing you do
As
with your
wives
mouth."
will.
Yeah. So just very, very brutally constructive feedback. So I had a lot of fun with it. And then I listen to it now, and I'm like, it doesn't really sound like me. It's just, but like I said, it was a labor of love, so it was really cool. I mean, that's not something you get asked to do every day.
I'm telling you, I watched it this morning. I got goosebumps watching it.
Yeah,
It still
yeah.
gives you the tinglies when you watch it still.
Yeah, it's and the fact that they asked me to do it was kind of cool because I remember talking to Frank Morris and Frank Anderson and Roger Nelson and Jack Parker, and there was a relationship that we had. Like when I was playing, I was very familiar with the guys that came before me, and they were very quick to kind of pull me inside and say, "Hey, listen, we've never missed the playoffs, right?" And that's not something.
screw this
you
up
know
for
what
the
I
rest
mean?
of us,
Yeah,
eh?
it's like, hey, we worked really hard to kind of build this. Don't mess it up, So, and that's something that I think we held each other accountable that way. And like I said, it's a different game nowadays because you get kind of a turnstile approach to personnel with the 1-year contracts. But I find that the teams that do well, the Calgary Stampeders, the Saskatchewans, the Winnipegs, they keep the same group of guys around within reason, right? I mean, you're always going to have your Kenny Lawler that priced himself out of that,
Certain
core or whatever.
markets,
So,
yeah.
and that's to be expected, or Andrew Harris or whatever. But I'm confident that we'll get back to that. It's tough, I know, for the average fan when they're looking at the lineup and they're like, "Who are these guys?" Right? And aside from the kids that are local, like David and Beard and and court, which they've done a really good job of, like bringing guys in from the community, which I think is a real easy sell. But if you're not keeping the same group of guys around, it's pretty difficult for the local average fan to identify with what you're trying to put out there.
Yeah. You have Métis heritage. Mm-hmm. When did you become aware of that? From what I understand, was later in life that it.
Yeah, I was always kind of aware of it. My dad was working for the Métis Association in Ontario, and my dad and my mom split up when I was really little, and then I would only see my dad in the summer times, and there wasn't a lot of contact otherwise. But then in the summertime, I would drive up from Tennessee or Dallas, depending on what period of my life it was. And we would go up to Canada, and I would spend from June till August with my dad, and then we would go on these big camping trips out to, I remember there was one we used to go to White River for a big Métis gathering, and I didn't really know a whole lot about that. Like, it was just, and I didn't live that life, it was, I lived with my mom, and she had her way of doing things, and then I went to my dad. I got to be honest with you, my dad didn't really supervise me, so, we were out there running around on the Métis gatherings. I think I had my first fist fight when I was 10 or 11 years old. Some 15-year-old kid wanted to fight me, so I punched him and ran back to my dad's campsite, and then my stepmom tried to jump in and try to break it up, and she got punched in the face, and so that wasn't really my life, right? So I just was trying to survive at these gatherings when I was a kid. But I learned a lot, and I retained enough of it that when I came back here to Alberta, to Canada, to play football, when I started to get requests to go out to the different, like to Drift Pile or go out to Masquachis or, even out to Cold Lake, I had enough of the core memories to feel comfortable when I was going out to those communities, and they welcomed me with open arms, and I continue to do that to this day. So.
And you work with Aboriginal kids a lot, or?
Yeah, I've worked with.
Is that important? To you?
Unfortunately, in the foster care system and in the group home, the group care facilities I work in, unfortunately, the Indigenous kids, the population is pretty well represented, and that's something that we'd like to see change. There's various reasons why that is, generational trauma, lots of different factors kind of figure into that. But and that's another thing, I see sometimes when I'm looking at these kids, I see myself, a little bit, some of the struggles that they have and trying to, just make their way through school. And, I was born with a nerve defect in both ears. I can't hear real well. I can't hear at all, actually, which is great, when your wife's yelling at you. It's not so great when you have to hear a fire alarm or
I want to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
You found out as a kid, right? You got that.
Well, I had my hearing. I was born with a nerve defect in both ears. When my mother was pregnant with me, she had a fall or something like that, and then she thought she lost a baby, and she went to the doctor, and they told her, "Yeah, I'm sorry, you lost a baby." So about a month or two went by, and she realized that she still felt there was something going on, and so she went back and said, "Oh no, it's a different time. It was the '60s, right? So I was born in '67, and so what the doctor says is that the doctor thought that she miscarried my twin, and as a result of the trauma, my hearing was affected. So what it is I have a nerve defect in both ears. When I wear the hearing aids, I can hear the blowers out there.
Yeah.
I have hearing aids.
Can, right?
I have hearing aids right now that I can listen to my phone on. Mm-hmm. Like they have Bluetooth. And I remember being a kid joking that one day I'll be able to get radio. And it was just a pipe dream, right? Because the first hearing aid I wore came on would look like a box. I had to wear it like this over my shirt. It came on like same material as a bra. And I had to wear it over my shirt. I had a cord that went up to my ear. It was very obvious, very evident that I was a different kid, right? So, and I didn't learn how to talk until I was about 7 or 8 years old, really. And I remember to this day, trying to focus on adults and try to figure out what they were saying because I couldn't understand what they were saying. So yeah, when I say that I relate to a lot of the kids that I work with, that's the type of thing I'm talking about. I was in a learning class until I was in junior high, and then I just refused to go, so they kind of let me. They let me slide, but I did a lot of extra reading, and that's kind of how I caught up with my classmates. But I still, to this day, when we're still going through the pandemic, but it's not significant as it has been. But when everybody's wearing masks, I struggle because I rely so heavily on lip reading. I went to learning the resource room, or whatever, and I learned how to lip read. And so it's like a secret weapon, right? You know, when I see married couples arguing out in public all the time, and I know way more than I should, right? So it's actually pretty cool. It's like a superpower. But when people are wearing masks, I don't have that superpower, right? And I'm really, like, my wife has been wonderful. She's been a rock, and she's been there to, like, say, oh, these people, because I can hear what people say, but I can't understand it because my brain scrambles it because it's a nerve thing. And it's been challenging. The last 2 or 3 years have been really, really challenging, you know, because, when you're in the public and people are like, what's wrong? Like, are you deaf? I'm like, actually, I am, you know. I can hear you, but I can't understand what you're saying. But anyway, live and learn.
Yeah, you said, people who know you really well will say he couldn't talk till he was 7, but he's more than made up for that.
Yeah, it can't shut me up, you know. My wife's like, why don't you ever shut up?
I want to talk about 1993. Was that your best year?
93?
Yeah, you won the Grey Cup that year.
Yeah.
Let's look it up. 17 special teams tackles, which wasn't your highest, but you had 10 sacks that year and an interception. Who'd you intercept?
Doug Flutie.
Oh, that's pretty good.
And actually, I mean, we got our hats handed to us on Labor Day, but I had a sack, an interception, and like 2 or 3 special teams tackles. I mean, it was like probably the best game I've ever had. And until about 2 months ago, I forgot all about it. And I think somebody sent me the game, and then I was watching it. I was like, I don't remember any of this, right? The reason I don't remember it is because we lost, right? So I didn't care. So going back to that was kind of trippy. And I showed my son, and my son was like, man, you used to be fast. And I'm like, yeah, thanks, I think, you know.
Do you watch much video of the old games?
When the world was kind of going crazy there, yeah, because I wasn't really doing much. I was on a health leave because I was having trouble sleeping. And so I got a sleep machine, and now I'm great, right? Because we were talking about before the broadcast about rest, between games for players, and that's true for anybody, like the average Joe. If you're not getting enough sleep, it's like operating at a deficit. And I was slowly dying, and then I got this sleep machine, and it's just amazing. Like, I crave a great night's sleep over anything else. Like, if you say, hey, Jed, come out, and we're going to, nope. I'm going to go home, and I'm going to go to bed. I'm going to be asleep by 10 o'clock. I'll get up at 9.
Nice. Man. 93 Grey Cup, too. What do you remember about the Grey Cup game in 1993?
The Grey Cup, you know what?
It was in Calgary, right?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. The thing I remember the most is that the whole year they were doing an introduction for the defense. And so they wanted to introduce the defense. And what they did was they introduced the defense with a 3-man defensive line and 4 linebackers. And what they did in that game is they switched it up, and they went to the 4 defensive linemen, and then the 2 linebackers, and then the extra defensive back, which we were one of the first teams to employ, like a nickel back, which was Donnie Wilson. And it was like a ploy to kind of keep people from guessing what we were doing defensively. And they introduced me as one of the defensive linemen, but I wasn't actually starting. It was Benny Goods and Tony Woods playing inside. And then the Grey Cup, they changed it. And they changed, so I was like, whoa, I'm not getting introduced, right? And so I was like, it threw me off. And that's the biggest thing that I remember, is the introduction was changed. So that threw me off a little bit. In both Grey Cup games that I played in 93 and 96, I threw no-hitters. I didn't really do anything. Like, I was just kind of there, but I didn't get any tackles. I didn't, you know what I mean? 93, I was too happy about the fact that we won to care about that. But in 96, it really bothered me, because I didn't show up on the stat sheet. So.
Yeah, a lot of times I find with pro athletes, they hate losing more than they like winning.
Yep.
And
I'm no exception.
I remember talking to Chris Jones about his a couple of games that he coached, and he said, I don't remember them because we won the game. You asked me about a game I lost, and I'll remember that. Right?
And that's why I laugh when people are talking about, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, they were winning games, but they must be the worst 4-0 team. And you know what? Nobody cares about that, man. Like, look what they did to BC last night. Yeah. Whether you win by 1 or you win by 50, you still get the W, right? And that's true. Like, that's a great example, because I don't remember scores in a lot of the games. I just remember we won, and nobody cares how you do it as long as you do it.
All right. Tell me about the cartoon with Giz. How's that going, and how are you enjoying seeing that come out every
The
game?
way that came about was I used to actually do caricatures of all my teammates, and because my locker was always in the old locker room before they gutted the locker room and put the new beautiful locker room that they have right now. But it used to be offense and defense, right? And so I was in the corner by the whiteboard. And so I would just grab, and I was always pretty good, like, at doodling and stuff. So I would just draw, and I would look, that guy's pretty ugly. So I'd draw him up, and hey, oh my God, you caught him, So the first guy I did, I think, was Gizmo. And Gizmo just finally says, "Stop drawing me, please." And I'm like, "Well, I'm just going to keep drawing you then if it bothers you, right?" So then we'd be out eating in the meal or in some place, and I would actually do the doodle of Gizmo while we were out in Vancouver at Hard Rock Cafe, hand it to the waitress and say, "Go send this over to that diminutive young man over there," and then she would give it to him, and he'd look around and see who gave it to him, right? But that was kind of how that came about. I was talking to somebody at the office about that, and they were like, "Hey, what do you think about us making a comic out of you and Gizmo?" And I was like, and that's kind of where that sort of started, that whole idea. And it's pretty cool, you know. It's not every day that you get asked to be, you know, in a comic. And I used to collect comics when I was a kid, and I was big into I was a DC guy. I liked Sergeant Rock and stuff like that, Unknown Soldier. So.
Man, I wish we had more time. I got more questions, but we're kind of running out of time here. So we're going to get to the red zone, which are the last 3 questions we do all the time. First CFL game you ever saw? Do you remember it?
Would have been my dad playing. I was probably 3, or I used to go in the locker room, in old Lansdowne Park there, and I can remember the way it smelled. It smelled like it was mildew. It was an old place, right? It was very damp in there, but yeah, I remember being aware of being around the guys and kind of puttering around on the field. So I can't remember. I couldn't tell you the score. I couldn't tell you who they were playing, but I remember Lansdowne Park.
By the way, you mentioned your dad's Grey Cups. You're the only father-son team, right?
No, there's quite a few, actually.
There's now more?
Yeah,
Okay.
Bear Holmes are on there. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
The Nelsons, they're on there.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So still pretty cool, though.
Oh, yeah. It's a great list to be on.
I read somewhere that your names are, the way it worked out.
69 and 93 are above and below one another, which is really cool.
That is pretty
I
cool.
mean, what are the odds?
Okay, back to the red zone. Second question, most memorable football game you've ever been a part of? Spectator, television, playing, anything?
The one that stands out, there was a game in Vancouver, and it was Halloween, I think it was, and we were down, and it might have been that crazy game we played against Doug Flutie, and we were just going back and forth, and I think Doug had like 500 and something yards, and they punted it to us, and Gizmo, and they were doing the same thing there that we did here, where they let the kids on the field really early at the end of the game, and the kids were actually down on the field and like all around, and they kicked it to us, and Gizmo took it to the end zone, and we won the game. And Gizmo just like pushing kids out of the way, get into the locker room, and I was like, "You can't push those kids, Gizmo, man. You're gonna get in trouble." He's like, "The heck with them kids."
All right, third and final question in the red zone. Biggest name in your phone?
Biggest name on my phone, probably. I did some driving for concerts a little while ago, so probably it's a tie between Young MC and Salt and Pepper, probably.
Nice. That's pretty good. That's pretty good.
It's not like we're texting each other or anything. It's not getting serious or anything, but
You got the number, though, right?
I got the number,
That's what
man.
matters.
That's more than most people can say.
Jed, thanks for your time, man. It's
Thank
been
you.
great talking to you. Great hearing some stories. Appreciate it.
All right. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, don't forget, check out the archives. You got some great interviews in the archives. You can you can follow, you can subscribe. You can do all that stuff with Antler Up, because we'll be back next week. He is Jed Roberts. I'm Morley Scott. We'll see you next time on Antler Up.
Antler Up, Edmonton, touchdown Elks. James Wilder Jr.'s got a pair. Oh, he's got a man wide open. Mike Jones has it inside the 10. He'll walk the dog to the end zone. Antler Up, Edmonton, touchdown Elks.